to London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Can I welcome members, officers and the public to today's meeting of the Environment Committee? Our main item of business today is, well, it's a subject which everybody's interested in, and it's London's fly tipping problem. Can I make sure that all of your electronic devices are switched off or to silent mode? Can I ask guests and members to position their microphones so they can be heard clearly? And can I start by asking our clerk, Hannah Barlow, if any apologies have been received?
Apologies for absence have been received from the Deputy Chair, Assemblymember Cooper.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendation set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interests to declare? Assemblymember Bath.
I'm a member of Roading Rubbish, which is, well, it is what it sounds like.
Thank you. Any further declarations of interest? No. Thank you. Agenda item 3 is minutes. Can I ask the committee to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of June 2026 to be signed by me as a correct record? Thank you. Agenda item 4 is summary list of actions. Can I ask the committee to note the ongoing actions arising from the previous meeting? Thank you. And agenda item 5 is action taken under delegated authority. Can I ask the committee to note the action taken by the former chair under delegated authority following consultation with party group leaders, namely to agree our report Zoning, the Heat Networks Puzzle? Great, thank you. Agenda item 6 is response to committee output. Can I ask the committee to note the response from the Minister for Energy Consumers to our letter and report on heat networks? Thank you. And agenda item 7, we move on to the main item of business, a discussion on London's fly tipping problem. I'd like to welcome our first panel of guests. In the chamber, we have Dr. Anna Scott, Director of Services at Keep Britain Tidy, and Casey Dalton, who's the CEO of Harrow Litter Pickers. And joining online, we have Dr. Helen Holmes, Senior Lecturer in Sociology at the School of Social Sciences at the University of Manchester. Good afternoon to you all. I will kick off with the first question, which is all government data indicates that the number of fly tipping incidents have increased year on year for much of the last decade, with cases in London being nearly 50% higher than 2018-19. Do these statistics reflect your experiences? Either start. Casey. Oh, you need to press your microphone button. There we go.
Thank you. Yeah, so honestly, I'd say not entirely, and from a Harrow perspective, in the best possible way. So in Harrow, we think we have bucked the trend in places. 5 years ago, there were streets that people would walk past dumped mattresses and a bag of rubbish, because they stopped noticing it and it had just become part of the landscape. And what we've learned is that fly tipping kind of feeds itself. So one dump bag obviously becomes permission for the next person to add theirs. But flip that around, the same is true in reverse. And when waste is removed fast, when people see enforcement action happening, then that's different. So I gently challenge the premise of that question. Higher recorded figures don't necessarily mean higher fly tipping is happening. They simply may mean that it's being reported and recorded more effectively. And when a community cares about where it lives, it knows how to report the problem and it believes something will actually be done. It's far more likely to report fly tipping. And the opposite is true. In places where residents have lost confidence, they don't know how to report, or where dumping has just become accepted as it just happens here, incidents are far less likely to be captured. So lower reported figures do not always necessarily mean less fly tipping as well.
Thank you very much. Anna?
Thank you. So I will speak as an employee of Keep Britain Tidy, which is an environmental charity. I am a resident of London as well. I live in the London Borough of Ealing. So yes, the national figures are definitely going up. year on year, and the figures show London as a huge fly tipping hotspot within that. That is absolutely true. I would echo what Casey said about the figures that we're using. So local authorities across the country have to report on their fly tipping incidents to government, and that's how these numbers are compiled. There is variation in how councils collect that data and how they report. So, for example, they might rely on reported fly tips. They may also proactively log fly tips that they're just collecting. So the figures, I think, are reflective of the problem, but I wouldn't say they are a totally true, accurate reflection. The figures also are about fly tipping on council managed land, not on private land, which is a huge problem in itself. So I think they are reflective of what's going on. But yes, across London, the figures over the past 5 years are getting worse. I have looked at what is happening within certain boroughs. So some boroughs are bucking that trend, but in general, the picture is one of it getting worse, and certainly that is my personal experience where I live in Ealing.
Thank you. And Helen, online, do you have anything you wish to add?
I do, yes, thank you. So to echo really what Casey and Anna have both said, so I am a researcher at the University of Manchester, and I've conducted, I think, one of the only recent qualitative studies into fly tipping. It was in Manchester, it wasn't in London, so I can't apply what we found directly to London, but I think there will be some comparisons. So definitely to echo what Casey said around the hotspots, which is the term that tends to be used for fly tipping, where once someone has seen that they can dump something there, then the other people join and carry on. And also to echo Anna in terms of the differences in data, our research also found that there's quite a lot of difference in systems as well, which can also make sort of on the ground measurement of fly tipping difficult. I'd also add to that on regards measurement, and why the figures might also be going up is that there are lots of pressures obviously on local authorities at the minute to increase recycling targets. So a side waste, which is a common fly tipping issue where someone will put a bin bag next to the bin because they can't fit it in, may be reported more often as fly tipping by waste operatives because they are under pressure to change that general waste to recycling ratio.
Thank you. So is it fair to say from what you've just been telling us that there's not necessarily an increase in fly tipping per se, it's just that there is greater reliance on reporting and people are more aware, or are there areas where the evidence supports the fact that it's actually on the increase in some places?
Exactly that. I think it's how these figures are reported, actually. Certainly, whether some local authorities are reporting what's being reported to them, and others are reporting what's being reported to them, plus what they're collecting. So the discrepancy in that alone leads to, within even local authorities, not a fair playing field when there's a comparison of figures. So I think the figures, yes, to be considered, but taken very much with a pinch of salt. Really, yeah, fly tipping obviously isn't a uniquely London issue. Many towns and cities kind of face exactly the same challenges. And our experience is kind of deprivation and environmental quality and access to legitimate waste disposal that are the things that sit behind fly tipping, rather than the actual geography alone.
Yeah. And without wishing to sort of lead the witnesses, as it were, do you think that the reason why we see, nearly double the rate of reported fly tipping in London is that simply because we have more people here and that there's more reporting, or?
Possibly. Possibly. I don't dispute that there probably is quite a large amount of fly tipping as well. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just to go back, I think there has been a move from London boroughs, as councils all over the country as well in more recent years, to actively promote the reporting of fly tipping by their residents. I think most councils are actively encouraging their residents to report. So I think that's an important trend to acknowledge.
Absolutely. I remember that Barking and Dagenham used to have a wall of shame, and they encouraged people to shop their neighbours if they saw them fly tipping.
It's also particularly easy to report fly tipping through apps that councils use. It's not as cumbersome as it might have been 5 years ago.
Absolutely. Helen, I spotted a smile creeping across the lips during that form of questioning. Anything you'd like to add?
No, I think everything has been covered, but yeah, I think the measurement is a key thing to factor in. I think it's probably a range of factors as to why those figures are going up. I do think I know we're probably going to get on to deprivation at some point, but I think if we can unpick that a little bit as well, that may help in understanding why it occurs and why it may be increasing in certain places.
Thank you. And moving on to a different but connected subject, obviously we're all familiar with the visual impact of fly tipping, but could you give us some idea of what the environmental impacts of fly tipping are that you either see or that you're aware of?
I think there's a huge waste of there's an inefficiency in the system when items are fly tipped. I think at the cause, we'll talk, I'm sure, about the reasons behind fly tipping and its increase, but at the core of it, people have access to more stuff than ever before. There's more stuff to get rid of, and people want rid of it generally quite quickly. And fly tipping, I think, is a byproduct of that, and a byproduct of how we don't particularly manage our waste well in this country. So when items are fly tipped, what I see on the ground are items that could have been primarily reused, things that could have been recycled, things that could have had a better destination than being left on the street, getting rained on, getting damaged, those materials can't stay in use. They're probably destined to go to energy from waste. So you have that huge waste of resources, and then you have the waste of resources of councils having to drive around and have separate crews going around picking up after people, and the carbon emissions that's associated just with that exercise. So I think those are the environmental impacts, and then of course on top of that you have the financial impacts on London boroughs, and you also have the way it makes people feel locally, and it makes people angry, it makes people embarrassed to invite people to places, embarrassed about where they live, affects people's feelings of pride in their community. So it's really a problem that is environmental but also wider than that.
I think it's important to say that some dumped waste as well is quite hazardous. And things do leach into the soil, contaminate waterways. We've seen examples of rivers being highly contaminated in our local area, and they harm wildlife, certainly. But yeah, I think what worries us, like Hannah's just mentioned, it is the impact of kind of what happens next. Once a spot looks neglected, it becomes an invitation, and the environmental damage isn't just what's sitting there at that point in time. It's then what people do after that point and how they treat that place afterwards. And so you're setting a precedent with fly tipping and basically legitimising it, and that's why it really does need addressing quite firmly. But we'll come to that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the benefits of having people coming to committees such as these that know what they're talking about, because you preempt the next question, which was going to be, and how about safety, civic pride, environmental and pollution hazards? Helen, do you have anything you wish to add on that particular subject?
Yes, thank you. And just to sort of echo again what Anna and Casey have said, but I think it's also important to differentiate between the different types of fly tipping. So obviously we've talked about there's this side waste aspect, which might be an extra bin bag at the side of the bin, where we might have issues of sort of litter if that is by rodents or pests. But then there's the bulky waste aspects as well, which Anna picked up on in terms of items which could potentially be reused and recirculated in different sort of circular economy type initiatives. And I think there's a real sort of social factor there on the well-being side, which has obviously been mentioned. If you're living somewhere that feels like it's an eyesore, then that can be quite detrimental to someone's sort of mental health and well-being aspects as well. So I think that then feeds in to that civic pride aspect. And I know, particularly in our research, that we have come across communally managed spaces, which we may get onto more as ways of tackling fly tipping, but they can have quite a big impact on preventing fly tipping from happening, obviously raising concerns that we don't put too much pressure on communities without the necessary support and resources to do that. But I can say more about the community managed spaces if people are interested.
I'm sure it's something that we'll come on to in due course. And thank you very much for those answers. We move to Assembly Member Boff.
Before I get on to my question, if I can, I did a Freedom of Information request from Barking and Dagenham Council, where I live, and it revealed that the tonnage of fly tip removed doubled just before this year's local elections, and the number of collections quadrupled in the week before the election and over the start of the year, and is now declining now the election is over. Do you think councils should be consistent in their approach to fly tipping throughout the year?
I think they absolutely should be consistent. I think this fly tipping consistently ranks as an issue that people really care about, the environment on their doorstep, litter and fly tipping and dog poo, issues like that. And I'm sure as Assembly members you have people raise those issues with you. I think fly tipping is a priority for a lot of councils, including London boroughs, because their residents really do care about it. But I think however they are responding, it needs to be consistent. There's no silver bullet here. There's not one thing that a council can do and then the problem's solved. It's about consistent services and consistent communications, consistent enforcement. So, yes, to being consistent throughout the year.
A consistent approach would be great. You know, in the last 2 years, I've made about 440 reports of fly tipping in my local area. And I can't say that there's a consistent response. Sometimes they're very good, may I say. I don't want to say they're useless. Sometimes they're very good, and within hours the fly tip is gone. But there's that lack of consistency, which means that the environment is still looks unloved. It still looks like a tip. So you'll understand, as they say in other parts of the world, this really grinds my gears, fly tipping.
Yeah.
It really annoys the hell out of me, and I'm sure it does with everybody else too.
I do think that local authorities are recognising that they do need to be more consistent, actually, and I think the voting populace are quite aware of this is an issue close to many people's hearts. You know, and it's something you walk past every day to the train station and see it every day. It does wear you down. And there's something kind of more corrosive underneath it all. If an area gets a reputation for being neglected, the people with choices tend to leave. And the people without choices are the ones left behind dealing with consequences. And that's why we don't see this really as it's an environmental issue with sort of a side effect on well-being. It's sort of almost the other way around. And it's really about pride and dignity and whether people believe that their community is worth looking after. And that's what needs fostering.
Thank you for that. I'll just go on to my question. My actual question. Thank you. To Dr. Scott, how does fly tipping differ between inner and outer London areas, would you say?
So I did look at some figures on this, so just excuse me while I refer to them. I have to put my glasses on because I can't see. So we can see that fly tipping within the inner London boroughs is consistently higher than outer boroughs when you look across the past 5 years. But although there's been that increase, fly tipping has gone down in 2 of the past 4 years in outer boroughs, whereas in inner boroughs it's gone up every year. So there is some variation there, but it's a particular problem within inner London boroughs.
Why would you say that was the case?
I think when we're talking about fly tipping, we sort of talk about it as this generic behaviour, but actually there are lots of different facets to that behaviour. So if we just sort of break that down first. There are, of course, residents who dump their own stuff out on their streets, round the corner, perhaps a little bit further away. So there's householder fly tipping. You then have a rogue trader element, where businesses who produce waste, so let's say builders or gardeners, might be dumping that waste in particular places, and also people operating as rubbish removal services, taking people's cash, saying they're going to get rid of the items and then fly tipping it. And then you have businesses fly tipping as well. So within the figures, there's categorisation of whether waste is household or commercial, etc. And just because a fly tip is household waste, you don't necessarily know whether it came from directly from a resident or whether it was a rogue trader that dumped it. So there's lots to sort of unpick within those figures. But I think within inner London, you have lots of businesses, you have lots of people living at high density, you have properties that are of an age where they weren't built for modern waste management, so you have waste on streets, and as we've just talked about, waste on streets breeds more waste. So I think within inner London, you've got all of those issues going on, which I think is what drives it particularly problematically there.
Thank you. Dr. Holmes, from your research, what is the connection between poverty or deprivation and fly tipping levels?
Yes, I think that's a really interesting question. It's deprivation, I think, is interconnected into lots of other things. I don't think we can just say it's deprivation that leads to fly tipping. So our research, as said, was in Manchester. It was mainly with waste professionals dealing with fly tipping incidents and counsellors. And there was lots of things that came out when we unpicked what was meant by socio-economic deprivation and its linked to fly tipping. So interconnected factors such as not having the resources to pay for bulky waste collections or access to transport to move excess waste to municipal recovery facilities. We also have found that a lot of the time it can be linked to housing tenure and type. So it might be that it's a rented accommodation and the landlord hasn't provided adequate bins, or they haven't been given the information from the local authority to understand what the local waste rules are. Therefore, you find that they're trying to do something with their waste, and that then may result in fly tipping. Our research also found that it's much more prevalent in short-term residences, where there's a high turnover of tenants, where it's quite difficult because of that short-term capacity to engage people in the waste rules. Connected to that, there are language and digital issues. So language barriers, communication barriers. People might not have access to the internet to be able to look up what the local authority rules are. Obviously, local authorities are not sending out information all the time because it can be very complicated. We're hoping that will get better with the simpler recycling legislation that's been brought in. But I think it's also important to mention, this has been mentioned, I think, by Anna as well, about urban infrastructure and the influence of that. So we've got high density housing, tightly packed streets, homes without any outdoor space where bins may be able to go, or homes which have communal waste spaces where it's very difficult then to manage what goes in those bins, and contamination can be quite high, wrong items in the wrong bin, and then that can lead to fly tipping. And then thinking also about that infrastructure and the difficulties it can be to get local authority waste vehicles around can also have an impact on whether fly tipping gets left or whether it's challenged. So I think there's really quite a variety of things that interconnect into that deprivation that needs to be considered when thinking about that social context and why fly tipping may be high in deprived, socioeconomically deprived areas.
Thank you. And Ms. Dalton, do you observe any patterns of fly tipping in the areas you litter pick? And from my experience with roading rubbish, who go out, I mean, I've noticed that in green areas you get more sharps, which of course you have to...
That's interesting. Actually, it
may be counter to your experience.
Well, as a litter picking group, actually, I think in Harrow, maybe we're blessed without sharps. We find more weapons than sharps. So our group has collected 107 knives and 3 guns. I think that they're more You find them more often than you'd find sharps, which anecdotally is interesting, but probably nothing more. Obviously, they're handed into the police, etc. But yeah, we definitely notice sort of patterns, and we notice residential streets. It tends to be mostly domestic waste, black bags left by bins, furniture, mattresses, small electricals, that kind of thing, dumped often near to communal bins. And then Harrow's quite an interesting borough to look at, because we've also then got quite an area of woodland and green spaces towards the north of our borough. We're kind of on the border of inner and outer London, and in those spaces we tend to get bigger volumes, often commercial waste, builders, rubble, garden waste, sometimes hazardous materials, and those are the spots that are sort of unwatched areas, easy to drive into. So completely different type of dumping that's going on. And then I think it's probably worth mentioning about our parks as well, because Harrow, we've actually been quite good on our parks recently. So not all fly tipping is deliberate. In summer and obviously in the warmer weathers, you've probably seen the pictures of parks with bins overflowing and spilling everywhere, and they fill up too fast. In Harrow, they've simply just put in larger park bins at the entrances to parks, and that really has solved a good chunk of that seasonal problem. Simple fix, but it's about different locations, different causes, and then looking for different fixes ultimately for those different types of fly tipping.
Thank you very much. Do you think there's actually, no, I will end there, because I've just suddenly realised I'm about to trample on somebody else's question. Thank you.
Indeed. Assemblymember Polanski.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Andrew. Anna, what role do you think there is for councils to make it easier to, quote-unquote, do the right thing, so bulk waste collection or community skips?
Thank you for the question. So over the years, we've done research with householders that fly tip, and we've identified a number of insights into what's driving or what excuses people give for that behaviour. So where there is friction in getting rid of something, where it's hard, it's difficult, that is going to tip the scales in favour of fly tipping. Now, that friction is seen in various different ways, and it's often couched around bulky waste collections being free, that the barrier is that there's a charge, and we touched on that sort of link to deprivation there. I think cost is important, but it is one element of friction. So a council could, in theory, offer a free bulky waste collection, but to engage in it, you have to be registered on the council website. You have to call a number. It might be 3 weeks before they can collect from your house. You have to have your item out on the footpath, but actually you live in a flat, so how do you do that? So you see there's all these sorts of things to navigate that just make it hard for people. So I think anything that councils can do to reduce that friction is welcome. Now that's hard because councils have limited budgets, and there's a lot for them to do. So it's a fine balance. But I think there are examples of London boroughs that have introduced things like community skips and have reported that they've seen fly tipping go down. I haven't looked at those figures in detail, but those are the statements that councils have made. So I think that community skips can be an important solution here, but it is always one element of a wider mix of initiatives.
And just to delve into that further, you're doing brilliant work as Keep Britain Tidy. How much is austerity or squeezed council budgets leading to more fly tipping, or indeed lack of enforcement from councils?
I think when it comes to services, I would go back to that point about ease of use, which isn't necessarily about whether it's free or whether there's a cost. I think a lot of council services around waste are not necessarily built around the customer. They're built around what works for the council. So there is a conflict there. I think certainly when it comes to the other side of enforcement, you see a lot of words and action from government about waste crime, and it's always, and from opposition parties, it's always about clamping down on the fly tipper, tougher penalties, more fines, etc. But council officers have to find who fly tipped first to issue anyone with an FPN or take anyone to court. that to me is about resource on those councils. So I think in a lot of occasions they have the powers, the penalties are there, although when it goes through the court system, the fines are often woeful and not really a disincentive. But you have to catch those people, and how do you do that? So CCTV has a role. Members of the public think CCTV is the answer to catching all of the fly tippers, but who's the person on the camera? You know, the van that drove up and dropped something off or dumped it illegally has a false number plate. So there's big challenges for there, and I think the resources that the councils have is a factor in the rise of fly tipping.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, but I'm the leader of Richmond Council, and we have a very successful community skip programme which we roll out, and it goes into each and every ward on a regular basis. And we also partner up with our Richmond Furniture Scheme. So anything which is usable, they take that away, and then the rest we sort out. It's singularly the most popular policy we've done in 8 years.
Yeah.
People can't
across every policy area, or just
policy.
people they love it.
They email, when's the next mega skip coming along? And I say, for people who are interested, queue this weekend.
Chair, before I come in with my first question, I can see Casey absolutely itching to come in.
Casey,
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that legitimate waste disposal is never the easiest option, because you can always take your item out onto the grass verge at 11 o'clock in the evening for free. So what we really need to do is to encourage people to be doing the right thing. And I think there are a few things that are really helping in Harrow and that I'd just like to quickly talk about. The single most effective preventative thing that I think Harrow are currently doing, in addition to picking up waste proactively, and I think that probably needs talking about as well. So they proactively pick up fly tips. They don't wait for reports. They go out and they look for them and they take them off the streets. Is to make legal disposal genuinely easy. And I think their offer is really, really strong. So they offer a free bulky waste collection service. So you can have 5 items collected every year for free as a household. You can have 2 free bookable trips to the tip every single day for free, so free. And then trade waste clothing is well advertised that you can have all your clothing taken away for free. And then they also offer a drop and go service similar to the community skip. I think it's just marketed slightly different, where a van turns up into a car park of a morning. And we find that this is an amazing tool because what it also does is it allows engagement with residents. So it gives that valuable time for face-to-face chats about free food waste caddies at the moment, obviously, and talking about responsible waste collection. So from our experience, the biggest gap, certainly in our borough, is not the actual service itself. It's awareness of the services available to people. We regularly speak to residents who are just genuinely surprised to hear about their off-free disposal mechanisms within our borough, which is such a shame when they have this whole plethora of stuff available to them. So, and also I'd say, looking across London, getting that offer standardised a little bit more with borough to borough. So really, when you're moving, it is a place where people transition from borough to borough very, very rapidly, and it would be nice to know what you were doing when you're moving from one place to another.
Excellent, thank you for that. I see that Helen has a hand raised online.
Yes, thank you. Lots to add there. The Harrow initiatives sound great and remind me of a piece of work I'm currently involved in as part of the Joined Up Sustainability Transformation Centre, which is a 5-year programme across the north of England, and we're exploring the role of community hubs and that idea of getting people engaged, be it to understand what circular economy initiatives are available locally or where they might find food provisioning is I think really important, that once we've got someone they can speak to, then they're there already. But I just wanted to pick up on what Anna said before about local authority rules not necessarily being built around customers and households and that importance of context. So one thing we found, and this is moving away from the bulky waste aspect, is that there has been quite a lot of behavioural change initiatives that local authorities have applied to try and increase recycling rates. But what that's often meant is that it's reduced general waste bin sizes, which then means that you have obviously less space for general waste. But if you're still a family of 8, it doesn't necessarily reduce the amount of general waste that you produce, and therefore you are still, having to find somewhere for that waste. So I think it's also thinking about, obviously there are pressures on local authorities and pressures on resources, but thinking a bit more about that context and how some of these nudge approaches might have quite a big impact across the board if people have got nowhere to put their waste, and then they're forced to find other alternatives such as fly tipping. But I just wanted to bring that in. Thank you.
Thank you. And we go to Assembly Member Mahfouz. I'm just conscious that we are marginally behind time, so if we can keep it up.
Yeah, I'll do my best. Just a bit from the offset, I've been Cabinet Member for Environment and Transport in Ealing previously, and certainly during 14 years of austerity, we had 2/3 of our budgets cut. It was, probably the environmental pressures are up there in terms of, as with a number of other boroughs, we had to rationalise the civic amenity sites in terms of where you might bring your bulky waste and so on. But what I can see now is that austerity is being reversed. Ealing, as an example, is getting significant increases in income, and that increase is going into frontline environmental services, new enforcement team out there, some of the stuff that you've been talking about, like Casey, in terms of community skip days, and in relation to free bulky waste collections from your door and so on. How are you seeing anything already, from what you've seen, Anna, perhaps across London, in terms of where that additional investment that boroughs are receiving are going back into those frontline environmental services?
If I can speak personally where I live in the London Borough of Ealing, I certainly see more communications and more action from the council. I feel like it might be making a difference. Like when I'm walking around, I still see a lot of fly tipping, but I feel anecdotally that maybe it's improving, but that's just a personal opinion. But I do look actively for litter and fly tipping.
No, sure. What I mean is, at a London-wide level, because certain boroughs are now getting more money, are we seeing that they are seeking to? And obviously, it will take a bit of time before you see the result of that. But more councils deciding to spend that money in this way.
I've certainly seen more councils coming out with initiatives and more visible initiatives around fly tipping. The figures that we talked about at the beginning, they're sort of all, by the time they come out, the figures are old, so you're always sort of playing catch up with that. But I think it's up there as a priority for councils, and perhaps now they have a bit more money to address that.
I mean, we've heard obviously earlier, and I've seen it too many times firsthand, where you've got landlords change over a tenancy. Either the old tenants or the landlord decides to get rid of a ton of bulky waste and perhaps just simple side waste, leave it on the street, as one of my neighbours did the other week, and I kindly left it back on their frontage and knocked on their door to ensure that they didn't get a fine. So I did a bit of community service for them. But how can we make sure? Is there something that we need to put in place to ensure that, for example, data sharing with estate agents or something like that tells us when the changeover of landlords is, or tenancy is happening, so that we can actually be on the front foot to ensure estate agents are sharing that information, landlords and tenants are doing the right thing in those scenarios?
We've done some research with private rental tenants, and we know that they do look to their landlord for rules around waste rather than looking to the council for that information. So I think always it is a good way to reach tenants through their landlords. I know that many landlords are responsible and many landlords are not, but always I think greater joining up of the ways in which you can reach people and the way you can communicate what's appropriate and what's not is important and valuable.
Equally, I mean, when I've been collecting refuse with the team out and about and then knocked on doors to find out where the refuse has actually come from, too often residents are saying to me, yeah, I've just left it there myself. And going back to the point about poverty and different areas, there's an element where some areas you leave something outside your house and you call it free cycling, and in other areas it's fly tipping. How do we see that reflected in terms of dealing with the communication with people as to how we effectively stop that full stop?
Casey, you want to
Yeah. I think that the messages need to be repeated through organisations and people that are trusted locally. Quite often it's very hard for local authorities to get that messaging out to their communities, especially in communities where English isn't necessarily the first language. And working through other organisations, making sure the message around fly tipping and waste disposal is going out. I mean, we have simple things in our borough, like barbecuing is not allowed in parks. Communicating that to a large demographic of our population is quite a tricky thing. And ensuring that those messages get to the right people, can be very, very tricky sometimes. But I don't think it's beyond the wit. I think it is something that can happen if local authorities put the time into engaging.
Helen, I'm sure you've got some stuff from your studies that you'd like to share with us.
Yes, just to add to that on the free cycling front, that there's also charity collections that often get confused for recycling as well. So I think there's potentially some joined up messaging there with charities who might be planning some sort of bag drop or something else. To also be clear about where those go, or maybe better communications with the local authorities. But yeah, just to echo to Casey in terms of the messaging needs to be clear, it needs to be in different formats, it needs to be in different languages, and not always digital, and probably repeated as well, because I think often local authorities will send something out once a year, but perhaps not more than that. But just opportunities for where people can get the local authority rules. We have discussed sort of like a QR code on bins, but again, there's an element of digital exclusion with that. But there are certainly different opportunities I think that could be explored.
If I could just add a point on communication, if we look at parallels with recycling, London boroughs are pretty good at communicating that. There's been a lot of effort put into that. We've got London supporting boroughs at a wider level. But actually communication around sort of basic levels of waste disposal, what to do with that thing that doesn't go in your blue bin or your green bin, whatever colour recycling bin you have at home, those unusual items, that is less routinely communicated. It's less clear. And I think that is also part of the issue. And just to say about the use of the term fly tipping, with our research with people who fly tip, is that term isn't necessarily very well understood. A fly tip to some people is a country lane with 500 car tyres dumped on it. It's not a bag by a bin at the bus stop. So we always talk about, in communication, you can use the word fly tipping, but also talk about illegal dumping or dumping of rubbish, or use the terms that people understand, because fly tipping is not necessarily a widely understood word by the public.
A really good point there, Anna. And I guess, are there examples that you've seen of good behaviour change methods, sort of in terms of inducing that improved behaviour change?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. We've got an interesting programme actually in Harrow where a lot of the volunteers are working very closely with our local enforcement team tape and sticker fly tipping. And this has had an absolutely huge impact to streets that were heavily fly tipped, because it kind of does two things. It creates immediate accountability in the area, and it creates awareness that you shouldn't be doing it. Because quite often people say, well, if the council pick it up quickly, it just legitimises doing more of the same. Actually, being able to tape and sticker fly tips, and volunteers doing that, because effectively I don't know whether a council would ever be able to resource taping and sticking every fly tip and then coming back to collect it. But volunteers on the ground who are actively involved anyway, taping and stickering what they're seeing, and then reporting it for collection. A day later it gets collected, but it sits there a whole day where everyone around it goes, well, it's got an enforcement sticker on it that says who did this. And that has seen, just anecdotally, I don't have the stats behind it, but we've noticed huge decreases in areas where we've been doing that. Not for much money, it's not a costly programme, but huge decreases in fly tipping.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in Ealing we did This Is Our Home, Not a Fly Tip campaign, which I think went absolutely viral online, beyond the borders of Ealing, and certainly from, as you're saying, Casey, as a number of boroughs effectively sort of cordoned off with enviro crime scene sticker tape around the refuse, the illegal refuse site, to make sure that people knew that actually what they were doing was wrong and it wouldn't be acceptable.
So that the crime scene tape intervention was something that Keep Britain Tidy trialled robustly for the first time in London pre-COVID. So Casey's saying you don't have the stats. I have some stats on that from that trial.
Great.
So we trialled it in hotspots in Newham, and the tape led to a 73% reduction in fly tipping incidents. And it's absolutely about that, breaking that expectation. That the more efficient councils are at whipping away fly tipping, it's a positive feedback loop of, OK, so I can dump stuff there because it just scores. And it's absolutely what Casey said, it's breaking that cycle. So the tape is a great way of doing that. We also trialled social impact stencils. So we left we knew and cleared the fly tip away, but left a stenciled message on the ground saying, you know, this wastes money for this community. And that had a really good reduction. I think it was a 2/3 reduction in fly tipping. And these interventions, when we tested them, they didn't lead to fly tipping elsewhere. We examined whether it just moved around the corner, and it didn't. And it had more lasting impact as well. So I think anything councils can do to be in those hotspots, doing something which breaks the expectation that stuff is just removed without any cost or without any repercussion, is positive. We've also tested interventions which have been simple signage. Same principles as the impact stencils, but they didn't lead to a reduction in fly tipping. So not everything you try works. You have to try new things to get a result, though. But I think what that is telling me, that it has to be quite in your face. It has to be, you know, the tape, the message on the ground to cut through.
I mean, we've all seen those the old signs that said no fly tipping,
and then there's a
just above a fly tip, and a regular fly tip. Casey, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just say that's something that's really worked well in Harrow, actually, and we're going to come on to CCTV, I know, but it is using CCTV then to kind of identify fly tippers that you might not know who they are because they're obviously individuals on foot, but putting those pictures out on an A-board at the location where it happens is a massive deterrent. That works really, really well, really effective, and we've certainly seen fly tipping hotspots dispersed. I wouldn't say solved because of that CCTV intervention, and displacement is a good thing because it then, you know, it shows that they know what they're doing.
Well, I mean, one of my next questions was around CCTV, actually. So I think you've all touched on it, but what role do you feel that using CCTV, naming and shaming, I know we've certainly used it online in terms of locally in Ealing, and people absolutely love it in terms of, you know, it's that local gossip and trying to identify the person who's the culprit here. But what role do you feel it has to play, Casey?
Right locations, it's great, but it's not a solution on its own. So it needs the follow-up of enforcement, and there is that risk that it will be displaced to the next unmonitored location. That's certainly what I'm seeing at a fly tipping and antisocial behaviour hotspot that I visited this morning. Exactly that. The street traders told me, this is amazing, it's stopped from here, it's gone to there. And that happens all the time. It will get displaced. People are very aware of where the cameras are and what they're doing. But that doesn't mean that they're not a useful deterrent, and displacement is good.
So do we see displacement by sort of 5-10 metres, or do we see displacement on a greater scale?
The next shady spot.
The next shady spot, yeah, just outside of the range.
Yeah, and that's why the enforcement element of following up on that evidence, why the pictures of people identified through the CCTV, having the enforcement backing up those cameras is essential.
Helen, Anna, I don't know if you wanted to add anything from any data you've got on it.
I think one of the drivers of fly tipping is that the perception of enforcement is low. You can take a calculated risk to dump something because you're probably not going to get caught, and certainly the numbers show that your fly tipping incidents are high, your number of FPNs or prosecutions are low. So I think anything councils can do to raise the profile of enforcement is really important. Residents love CCTV. They think it is the answer to everything, and there are big challenges around it. And I think, as you rightly say, it's about the enforcement backup. But it is one of the tools in the toolbox, and I think the higher profile you can make it is useful for councils.
And Helen, do you want to come in with data you've got?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think CCTV, as the others have said, is a tool in the armoury, really. But I think one thing to note is that we found from our research that many participants spoke about residents having sort of a fear of retribution if they named and shamed fly tippers, particularly if it was one of their neighbours. So that was something that they were quite concerned about, and maybe CCTV would play a role there, so they don't feel quite so much that they have to be the ones that effectively name and shame. And then also just to say that many participants, particularly sort of the waste professionals, talked about the many years it takes to prosecute fly tippers, which I think can also be a deterrent. Not a deterrent from people fly tipping, but definitely a deterrent from going forward with those enforcements.
We've seen obviously the league tables of number of fly tips around different borough to borough and how that's changed over the years. Ealing were top of the table for a number of FPNs issued, fixed penalty notices across London. That of course varies again across London. How important is it that we have high level of fixed penalty notices issued and the impact that you see of those on the ground? Casey?
Councils have a few weapons in their armoury. Yes, FPNs is one, community protection warnings are another, community protection notices. They have various things that they can do, and also, of course, they can prosecute. For smaller scale domestic fly tipping, and pursuing a full prosecution is not always the most proportionate or cost-effective response. And in many interventions such as CPWs, CPNs can achieve quicker and more effective behaviour change. I think, it's really a sort of a case-by-case basis. What I would say on that is, at the moment, I think local authorities are struggling with those bigger cases, so those cases that are a straight prosecution. And I think they're finding them very difficult because those links that are needed with police are not always as strong as they should be. And councils have limited powers in how they can investigate fly tipping. They can't do subscriber checks. They can't really explore the evidence within that fly tip. And they do need, in certain circumstances, police backup. And I think police obviously have quite often other priorities and bigger priorities, and fly tipping is not necessarily always one of them. And I think local authorities, certainly enforcement departments, are really struggling with that at the moment. I'm noticing with trying to get those bigger cases and the sort of the large scale fly tippers held accountable.
Excellent, thank you. We are short on time. If it's a very small interjection, Assembly Member.
Extremely small. Do you think the boroughs themselves are talking enough to each other? Because
absolutely not.
And this is a question from Roading Rubbish that has been texted to me, may I say. So it's not my question, but they're just saying if we had some kind of vehicle reporting that could be shared amongst different authorities.
Is so needed.
In Barking and Dagenham, for example, there's a suspicion that the same people are dumping in Grays in Essex, and yet that's two boroughs who've got those one piece of information.
So joining the dots. Fly tippers do not respect boundaries. They're not only going to stick to Harrow or Brent or wherever they're in. They cross boundaries all the time. They're looking for the easiest opportunity. Sharing information with boroughs, between boroughs, and with the police is absolutely essential, and that database needs to exist.
Thank you. And this leads neatly into the question from Assemblymember Harami.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to turn first to Casey, just about some practicals about how you work with the local authority and partners to increase enforcement and prosecution. Do you have any kind of insights of how you do that?
This is probably the area that we feel most strongly about because we really do believe that communities are one of the biggest untapped resources when it comes to tackling fly tipping. In Harrow, we've developed a volunteer-led evidence gathering model in close partnership with the council's enforcement team. And I want to stress here that this isn't like an open to all scheme. Our evidence gatherers are trusted, vetted volunteers who regularly litter pick, yes, but they know their local areas inside and out, and they've built a really good track record of responsible reporting. And we also meet fortnightly with the strategic head of the environment to review our cases, and we share intelligence, and we track progress on more complex investigations. So we are really working closely with our local authority. Our volunteers are even trained by council officers to identify evidence within fly tipping. And to date, we've submitted approaching 500 witness statements for consideration by our council. So we're talking about court quality evidence that is going to a local authority. The important point is that community in Harrow is not replacing enforcement. They're extending its reach. They're providing extra eyes on the ground, local intelligence, and a level of kind of local neighbourhood knowledge that no council team could ever replicate. And just as importantly, they give residents the confidence that their neighbourhood matters and that the reporting a problem is going to genuinely lead to action. So we do honestly believe that this model is something that could be replicated across other boroughs, but I think there's one really important caveat with it, and that is to start really small, because to build it at a pace that allows you need to build it at a pace that allows an enforcement team to respond to the information that they are receiving and gives trust in the working relationships and the time to develop. And the success of the model depends on the partnership and the confidence and the mutual respect, which, council officials working with members of the public, that's tricky. But once those foundations are in place, it can be scaled up with real confidence, and that's what we're seeing in Harrow now.
And just so, how difficult was it to make that first step to get that trust from the council?
Incredibly difficult. I don't know how you scale difficult. Incredibly difficult. But I think now we have a working model. We have a model that is replicable and a real relationship built on trust, where we trust to have honest conversations around what's working, what's not working. We do not expect our enforcement team to be taking every case forward. We see the volume of stuff that they receive, and we're fully understanding in what they can take forward and we're realists in this. But what we want to do is ensure that we're getting maximum bang for buck, really, and that we are getting people held accountable with what the council have got in terms of resource and what we have, but working together as a partnership.
You were so efficient in your answer that you've actually answered a couple of the follow-ups I had. But just on another issue, because you mentioned that fly tippers don't respect borough boundaries, but one thing that they also don't respect is who owns the land. Now, where do you stand in terms of parts of land that might be private? And I know, obviously, I saw you last weekend collecting litter on a bit of land that was private in between a council park and a TfL rail track.
But which bit, actually?
What your experience is, going to give us some feedback in terms of fly tip on
So we
private
actually do
land.
a lot of work on a mix of land. We listen to residents. We're led by residents on what is necessary. And yes, we work on private. We work on unadopted. We work on many different and obviously council land as well. What we found has worked really, really well is to work with the people around that piece of land. So recently we've done quite a lot of work in alleyways. So service roads get really very badly fly tipped. And so what we try to do is not only clear those areas, so we've recently taken sort of 20 skip loads out of one High Street, the service roads there, but we try and build small pockets of community around those areas. So we really work hard to build active WhatsApp groups around each of those little small service roads as they're being cleaned. And then we support those groups because we know it'll come back. We know that the waste will return, but it's about accountability. It's about building something in that area that's stronger and where community can actively support themselves. And the waste removal itself, the bill for that has to either be foot by the residents themselves around that area, and that's where we can come together and try and club together and get them to unite on getting rid of it, or we as a charity support them with that.
And is there anything else that you can suggest maybe that can be done to address this? To
address?
The fly tipping on private land?
I think local authorities really supporting landowners. quite often there's so much to do on public land that local authorities find it hard to go and to support when a landowner comes to them and tells them that there's an incident on their land, but to really listen to their concerns around what's happening on their land. But also to use that weapon of enforcement. Quite often landowners are neglectful. They aren't clearing their land and they're not securing it as they should. Quite large landowners and large organisations as well. And it's about speaking to them and really, you know, council enforcement giving them the necessary powers to support them with that.
Yeah, just speaking of large landowners, I think one of the, an issue definitely that you contacted me about probably about 5 years ago was TfL land. So land that isn't necessarily owned by the local authority, but owned by a public body. And can you just feedback maybe on some of your experiences around that?
We need a whole other 2 meetings, but so. Transport for London own just a large section of walkway that runs through our borough. It's about 1.5 miles long. Quickest way to get from one end of the borough, one section of the area to the station. It's a common walkway for children, schools, etc. When we started, there was no maintenance there at all. It was an area with nothing. We've battled for 4 years to try and get something in the way of street cleansing in that area. We still battle. We are now at a point, volunteers will clean and maintain, but getting that collected is really hard. There's a lot of work to do there around those areas, and it's not the only one. There's networks of it that run throughout the whole of London.
So given we're obviously here at City Hall, if there's a message for the Mayor and TfL, what message would you give today?
Oh, talk to local authorities around these areas. And at the moment, if you go to report a fly tip on a piece of Transport for London land, it will refer you automatically to the local authority to pick it up. The local authority will then close that down immediately.
Yeah. Okay. And just so this is a question to all really. Is there more that can be done to support the reuse and recycling of waste that could also reduce fly tipping? Dr. Scott, can you come in on that?
Yeah, I think that fly tipping has to be seen within the wider issue, the wider context of waste management and the circular economy. It can't just be seen as an isolated add-on.
And anything from Dr. Holmes online on that?
Yes, definitely. So I think, you know, there's a big role for sort of reuse hubs here as well. We have a number in Manchester. I talked before about the growing role of community hubs as well, which I think play a big part, but just really opportunities for people to not just reuse, but also repair, potentially upcycle things, may also reduce fly tipping. There are issues there, obviously, around mobility and transport and access. But I do think there is a big role that local and locally led circular economy initiatives could have. And even things like tool libraries, toy libraries would also cut down on consumption and hopefully have a knock-on effect on the amount of waste as well that people produce.
And do you see any role for extended producer responsibilities, so take-back schemes that will make it easier for people to do the right thing, but also for producers and manufacturers to take responsibility?
Yeah, I can answer that if that's okay. Yes, definitely on the take-back schemes, but I think it still comes back to these same issues of how do people get things there, particularly a lot of those items will be those large sort of bulky white goods, so how do you get them back to the retailers and producers? But I do think there is a potential opportunity there, as there is at a much smaller scale around incoming deposit return schemes. As I know, we've got a while to wait for that now, but and it's only, I think it's only, is it just bottles at the moment, but extending that into other materials and products may be a further opportunity to reduce particularly littering, but also how that feeds into fly tipping as well. And one last thing to add with EPR, obviously those funds are ring-fenced. If some of those funds could be used to support circular economy initiatives, locally led circular economy initiatives, I think that would be fantastic, because they are often volunteer-led and don't have a lot of resources.
Right. That's it from me.
Thank you. Assembly Member Mahfouz, bearing in mind that we have 6 minutes left. So
yeah, I think most of this has been covered already in terms of coordination across London. Just want to pull it back to that TfL sites, because you've got this complete mix of grounds maintenance is done by TfL or not, as you've pointed out, Casey. You've then got the refuse, the collection and street cleaning. Well, the street cleaning aspect is supposed to be done through a contract with local authorities. So TfL pays some money to local authorities. It depends, I guess. And then the fly tipping just seems to never get dealt with. You know, clearly it's a complete mishmash, which is, even the people who are on the front line don't understand it properly, and actually it clearly doesn't work. What do we need in place? What sort of framework do we need in place to ensure that this is not the status quo going forward?
I think the majority of issues around waste dumping or large waste sites and dumping and problematic persistent sites of dumping are to do with land ownership issues. And certainly those communications between Transport for London and local authorities need to be far better. Local authorities need to know who they can contact at Transport for London. They need to know how to get results. There are areas, huge swathes of Transport for London walkways, railway bridges that are not maintained, not cleaned, and have no council cleansing on them either. They sit in a no man's land, and they become magnets for antisocial behaviour and fly tipping because of that. It is a significant problem throughout the whole of London.
And you've all touched on Re-London earlier, which I used to be on the board of. Oh, sorry, Anna, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, if I can just speak on that point. So I think what's needed at a local authority level are for councils to have fly tipping strategies. So we know that across the country, it's more common for councils not to have a strategy. So they're certainly picking up fly tipping and they're doing enforcement and they're doing activity, but it is not a strategy. It's not brought together with all stakeholders playing their part in tackling this problem. So I would say that I would recommend that all London boroughs have a fly tipping strategy. I think above that, there should be a London-wide fly tipping strategy. We know London is worst hit by fly tipping. There is nothing strategic across the whole capital addressing this problem. And that could more easily for boroughs leverage the relationships that Casey's talking about with private landowners, for example, TfL, who all landowners have a legal responsibility to keep their land clear of litter and refuse. That's statutory guidance. That's a statutory responsibility that landowners decide to conveniently ignore because it's just too difficult. That's going to be difficult for individual boroughs to navigate those relationships, but it's something that could be more easily tackled and bring organisations in line through a London-wide strategy.
And obviously, the Mayor's got the Re-London board, which I used to be a member of previously. One of its areas of work was in terms of working with boroughs, in terms of particularly around reduction and recycling, launched the circular economy plan and so on. Is there a role to be played there, you feel, for Re-London, for your own organisation, for London councils around this London-wide strategy?
I do think it needs to be thought about as a pan-London exercise. Like you say, fly tippers don't respect boundaries. They'll fly tip anywhere, and London boroughs working together under an umbrella of support is likely to have the most impact.
Okay, thank you. Assembly Member Turrell.
There we go. My able colleague has come to the rescue. So I've got three very quick questions that I think are best directed to you, Anna. I'll push mine. I'll see if I can push mine luck. Starting with, some of London's boundaries are in quite bizarre places, and we've spoke a bit about some of the lack of collaboration between councils. I know there's a number of cases where council might own a tip basically on the borough boundary, but that tip can only be used by the residents of the borough that owns it. Do you think that's something perhaps the Mayor and Re-London should be looking to make sure that people can use the tip most convenient to them, not necessarily the nearest one owned by their council?
Yes, that would help.
There we go. Thank you. That's, so moving then to the fact we spoke about the idea about the fact that organised crimes particularly are getting more involved in fly tipping as a way to make. Do you think there's enough prevention work being done by the joined up authorities on this, and what more do you think could be done? And I'll let Casey come in because I'm seeing reaction.
Fly tippers, particularly commercial operators, they exploit the gaps between boroughs. We need better intelligence sharing, stronger cross-borough working, closer collaboration between councils and police. And local authorities, I think, also need appropriate powers and resources to investigate effectively. There's a lot to be done.
I would agree with that. The other side of that coin is about trying to cut off the supply of waste to those that will go on to fly tip. So Keep Britain Tidy have a campaign called Fight Fly Tipping, and it's all about educating the public on their duty of care to avoid handing their waste over to people who then fly tip it.
Just on that, on waste carriers, at present, I don't know what you know much about waste carriers and waste carrier licensing, but the licensing system, we certainly feel as a local group that it just presents. At present, it offers too little protection for residents acting in good faith. So rogue operators often obtain a legitimate licence and then they take payment and remove waste and then they fly tip it illegally. And we're seeing examples of that often. The current system places really a lot of responsibility on the resident and not enough on the offender. And we're often seeing residents held to account for their fly tipping being left wherever. But actually the offender often gets away with it. I'm not sure that whole thing is totally fit for purpose, but that's probably a wider discussion.
Thank you. Assemblymember Polanski.
Thank you. Casey, the government have a target of reaching pre-2024 fly tipping by 2029. Do you think they're going to hit this target? And if not, why not?
So
the government have a target to hit pre-2024 fly tipping levels by 2029, so to go back to where it was.
See a decrease in fly tipping. I'm not on the current trajectory. I wouldn't have said no. But I'm hopeful that if local authorities start to look to engage with their communities more, and those residents who really care deeply about where they live, and that they look to perhaps enable them and work alongside them, that might help. I think making legal disposal really easy will help in improving public spaces and understanding why individual hotspots is absolutely essential. I think quite often we just reactive to the fly tipping and we're not actually trying to understand why that fly tipping is happening in that area. So really looking, prevention and enforcement should really work hand in hand. One is far less effective without the other. So if they employ the strategies open to them and they work smart, then yes. But I would say community is obviously a very valuable tool that's very underused currently.
That seems like a very hopeful place to pause on. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. That takes us to the end of our questions. I always try to ask that were there any points which any of you hoped might come up that you think, damn, I wish we'd been asked about that you would now like to share with us?
I just want to say, I don't think fly tipping is it's not an inevitable thing, and it's very easy to see it as just the price of living in a large and busy city, but I don't think that our experience in Harrow certainly tells a different story. And when communities and councils and enforcements, on a hopeful note, genuinely work together, behaviour can change. So there is hope.
There we go. Now, does anybody else have a similarly uplifting message on which to end? No? No? Excellent. Thank you. Well, that ends the first of our panel discussions. I'd like to thank our guests, Dr. Anna Scott, Casey Dalton and Dr. Helen Holmes, for their contributions today. We're now going to adjourn for 5 minutes whilst we change panels. Thank you. Welcome back to today's Environment Committee meeting. We'll now continue our discussion on London's fly tipping problem. And I'd like to welcome our second panel of guests. In the chamber, we have Dan Cook, Director of Policy Communications and External Affairs at the Chartered Institute of Waste Management, and Barry Russell, MBE, Regulated Industry Environment Manager for the Environment Agency. And joining online, we have Bob Mead, who is the National Lead for Waste Enforcement at the Environment Agency. So, thank you very much for joining us today. The first question is, you will have just heard the first panel discussing the reasons for the increase in fly tipping over the past decade, with a particular focus on smaller scale fly tipping on streets. What would you say are the biggest causes of fly tipping and larger scale illegal dumping in the London area? Anybody can start. Barry.
Yes, yeah, happy to go first. I think the focus for ourselves, certainly with the Environment Agency, is on the larger scale, what we call the illegal waste sites, where the fly tipping is generally worked on by the local authorities. We tend to look at the larger scale, so what we call the big, bad and nasty, anything over 20 tonnes. What do we see as the causes of that? So there's the avoiding disposal costs. We see that as very significant in terms of the reasons for these illegal waste sites. Commercial waste collection, avoiding landfill disposal charges. It could be hazardous waste, which is very expensive to get rid of. So the avoidance of those disposal charges are certainly up there as one of the big reasons why we're seeing an increase in illegal dumping. There is potential lack of awareness what people's legal responsibilities are. That tends to be more, if you like, with the individual householder in terms of the duty of care and making sure that they are giving it to a licensed carrier. Less so lack of awareness with the big, bad and nasties, the illegal waste sites. They know full well what they're doing and what the reason for why they're doing that. Why is there more? Well, there's certainly large volumes of waste. Construction, demolition, garden clearance, house renovation projects can increase and generate substantial waste. And when the costs for those disposals with the local householder are high, they will look for cheaper routes to get rid of that. And then that will be bulked up and then can reappear at an illegal waste site with significant amounts of waste. I think the perception of the risk is low. So it's previously been described as a new narcotics in terms of the money that there is within illegal waste. The custodial sentences, if they ever happen, are an occupational hazard, but the rewards are significant. If you were to be doing something similar sort of trades and values in drugs, you'd get a significant custodial sentence. The perceived risk is very, very low to those involved with it. A little chance of being caught and weak penalties. There is a difference we are seeing between rural and urban factors, and particularly in the rural areas. So less so around here, obviously, but the rural areas, it's very easy to do in terms of isolated fields, lay-bys, providing opportunities for offenders to dump waste unnoticed. But in urban areas, we are seeing it, as was described by the previous panellists, as being more sort of household furniture, rubbish can be dumped in alleyways, vacant lots, and so on. I think the final bit I'll end on is the economic pressures that businesses are seeing in terms of the looking to reduce expenses and their waste management costs, and they will quite happily look for those illegal routes for getting rid of their waste.
Thank you. Dan?
Is that right?
That's right.
So I back those points. It is a heady. It depends on the level, whether we're talking small scale or large scale. But in general, it's a heady mix of cost avoidance, paying for waste services that protect economies, communities, and environments costs money. There is a cost to it, and those costs have risen over the last 10 years, especially. With landfill tax and other associated costs, and therefore avoiding those costs, there is a quick buck to be made and a substantial buck to be made if you do it at scale. Site and service access is undoubtedly a factor. So especially for small businesses, trying to find the right route is not always easy. You are barred from household waste recycling centres run by local authorities often, or you are charged, and to book a place is very complicated and time-consuming. Same for householders. We discussed access to your nearest tip or household waste recycling site. It's not easy. You are sometimes directed a long way away because your local one is in a different London borough or local authority. So site and service access is a crucial factor. And then ignorance, sometimes willful, sometimes not, is also a factor. So a heady combination of those things.
Thank you. And Bob, online, do you have anything you wish to add?
Sorry, I'm struggling to find my hand.
Oh, I'm not sure whether we're picking you up on the microphone there, Bob. No. I'm afraid it's not coming through, Bob. Do you want to try the age-old thing of log on or log off and log back on again, and we'll bring you in when you come back? What we'll do, whilst we're waiting for Bob to return, we'll move on to Assembly Member Turrell.
Thank you, Chair. What single change could be made by the government, the Mayor or the Mayor of London or the boroughs, which you think would have the biggest impact in reducing fly tipping and illegal dumping?
Shall I start on that? So I think the government is to be commended. This government is to be commended because it has brought in a raft of reforms, or is bringing in a raft of reforms that were sitting there ready to go, developed by the last government, and stalled for a number of years under the Resources and Waste Strategy 2018. And within that, the things that are coming through at the moment, which will have either a direct or indirect impact, include probably the most important one, which was known as carriers, brokers and dealers, which Bob will know because we sat on a group designing the regulations more than 10 years ago. It has taken that long to draw up the right regulations, to put it into strategy and then get it actually put into law. That's now called the Controllers and Transporters Regulations and is going through Parliament as we speak. That will stop. So previously, if you wanted to be a waste carrier, all you had to do was register to be a waste carrier. Really light touch registration, open to abuse. There are high-profile stories in our sector of people registering their dead dog, their dead goldfish. The Country Landowners Association recently registered a cow called Bovine as a registered waste carrier. That's all it takes. It's that easy, and you then get a piece of paper that you can show to a householder or a business, pick up your waste and do anything with it and shortcut the system. The Controllers and Transporters Regulations will make it a permitted activity. You will have to get a certificate of competence, be trained and issued with that, and the Environment Agency can then regulate that. That will be a big loophole closed, which is the one thing I would say. There is a little raft of other stuff coming in, digital waste tracking, some of the stuff you've talked about this morning, but that's the one thing if you're asking for one.
Yeah, and absolutely building what Dan said, going hand in hand with the reforms and greater traceability of waste movement is both the waste carrier licensing, the changes to the reforms to the waste carrier licensing, but also the digital waste tracking system. And what that's looking at, the potential for that, the electronic waste transfer notes forming part of the government's digital waste tracking programme will actually digitise records of waste movements and enable us to be far easier to be able to identify where waste has come from. So when we are undertaking operations and we will go to a site, either a permitted site that isn't operating within the confines of the permit that it's issued with and taking in waste and either not declaring it as hazardous or it being inappropriately treated, or we are finding carriers that are taking material to an illegal waste site. we will have a much better way of backtracking through, with it being digital, because at the moment it's a very paper-based system. A lot of the paper-based transfer notes are not available for various reasons. It's extremely difficult to trace and to work through. Just as an add-on, I think that's areas where I think it's going well, and I think there's some real improvements that are coming through, and we're really pleased to see those. I think an area where it is going to be continues to be challenging is that one that I talked about at the beginning, is actually the risk is low to those undertaking it. The sanctions are laughable. That's if they get to the point of being taken to court and a prosecution being taken. We are also finding at the moment severe delays at court. So I personally have a site in my area at the moment, which I can't name for legal reasons, and I have been looking to put a restriction order where I can send my team out and put concrete blocks across it to stop access to it. That has to be heard by a court within 7 days, and that was 4 weeks ago, and it's still not been heard because there is no court time. I cannot stop people accessing that site in the meantime, and the illegal waste is still going in there. So I think it's not only our ability to do what we need to do, but it's the actual support of the partners and having the resources. And they work fantastically. The courts we work with are fantastic, but they're under the cosh as well in terms of being able to manage and process what we need in the speed and the timing list we need it.
Thank you. I see that Bob's joined us back online. Bob, are you hearing us?
I'm hearing you. Are you hearing me?
We are. Excellent. So, if you may recall, the question which we had for you earlier on was, what would you say are the biggest causes of fly tipping and larger scale illegal dumping in London?
I do recall that. And Barry gave the answer I would have given. The only point I would add to Barry's, perhaps, or take some slight issue with him, is that our data doesn't show any significant increase. Clearly, the fly tipping data does show significant increases, but our data on illegal waste sites and illegal dumping showing some slight signs, but within margins of error that mean that we can't sort of nail anything to it. I think the nature of what's happening is changing a bit, and we're seeing more complex, organised events. But the total numbers possibly aren't changing all that much. But fundamentally, it's the money to be made from the process and the relative lack of penalty for doing so.
Thank you so much. Assembly Member Torre, do you have any more questions?
Not on
your list?
No, I had number 12 to ask.
No, that's fine.
So, yeah, so I'm moving on to then. So what are the main environmental impacts of fly tipping and illegal dumping that you see in London? I'll start with you again, Dan.
Shall I start? So it's important to say it's not just environmental impacts. The impact that fly tipping has, it causes misery and anxiety to local communities. It stifles and hobbles local economies. And the strict environmental impact from a scientific point of view is often relatively limited because it's relatively inert household or commercial and industrial material. However, that's not to underestimate when it does go wrong. I don't have any London-specific examples of environmental damage at scale, but there are obvious things. If you're disposing of and shortcutting the system when it comes to hazardous materials or even or potentially hazardous materials that have been involved in a commercial or an industrial process, and that you're tipping them near a watercourse, for example, then it has obvious pollution potential. If you are dumping dangerous waste, and that is even white goods. So there are, unfortunately, notorious cases of kids playing on white goods and getting either cut or locked in them, etc., etc. So there are a raft of environmental, but I would emphasise that it's not just environmental damage. It is amenity damage and economic damage that should be looked at equally.
And absolutely, to build on that, and that was a really good example of sometimes the unknown damage. It's quite often it's easy to see the physical damage that is done to our environment, and it was I think Casey Dalton mentioned it in her session about how it then changes the way people respond to their local environment when they see this, when they see rubbish and so on. I think having talked about the sort of social side of things, I'm happy to talk about the environmental side of things, because we know there's 400, in 2024-25 there was 480,000 incidents, fly tipping incidents that were recorded within London. And bringing that through in terms of the high, we now publish a list of our priority illegal waste sites across England. There's 117 in total, 3 of which of those high priority ones are in London. So it sort of gives some facts and figures or some figures, if you like, to the size of it. The types of material that we're seeing, the environmental impacts and the materials we're seeing: asbestos, paints, solvents, oils and fuels, batteries and electrical waste, chemical containers, industrial waste, tyres, and a key one for us at the moment is clinical and hazardous waste. And hazardous waste are things that can release toxic substances into the environment, and they often have very, very long-term environmental risks. The impact will be on soil contamination. So you have rain, weathering, pollutants will leach into the ground. So a illegal waste site won't be engineered like a proper engineered landfill. It will leach, and it will leach through and have impacts potentially on waterways. So it can impact rivers, streams, canals and reservoirs. Surface water pollution, blocked water courses and flood risk. So when we're looking at more sort of fly tip material, that making its way into the river, and it blocks and causes localised flooding. And then groundwater contamination and ending up really with both impacts on wildlife and diversity and also air quality impacts. We have aware of some illegal waste sites that, because of the putrescible waste inside of the illegal site, it does cause hotspots. Those hotspots will burn. There's one in particular in the North London area that is consistently having the fire brigade called out to it to dose it down. So there are those impacts as well. So we're seeing the impacts on smoke and the localised impacts on the environment. We spend a lot of time and money monitoring those, both with, we have drones which we send up to record the landfill, the illegal waste site, to measure it, to quantify it, and also to, with special sensors to be able to determine where the hotspots are. We also have sondes which we put in the river. We have automatic water quality measuring stations where we can actually assess the impact of some of these illegal sites as well.
Thank you for those. Do you have anything to add on that, Bob? Or
No, Barry is much closer to the operational side of things than me, so I'm very happy to leave it with him.
Perfect. And then could I ask then, it's probably more for you than Barry, how common is it for fly tipping sites to include hazardous waste?
If we were to talk about illegal waste sites, which is more where my focus is, I would probably say if we're looking at fly tipping sites, it's less likely because that tends to be material that has come from householders and, if you like, not necessarily from an industrial process. Illegal waste sites, where some of the significant ones we're seeing, the majority of those have got hazardous waste in them. And that's because hazardous waste is so expensive when you've got landfill tax and the profits to be made and the avoidance of tax and the relevant charges. You are far better to be putting, as a criminal, you're far better to be putting hazardous waste into these sites than just inert waste, because the amount of money you're saving is significantly increased. And we are seeing these sites having lots of what's called trommel fines. So when material is taken to a waste transfer station and it is picked in terms of what can be recycled, the residue that's gone up through what's called a trommel, it's fine, it's dust material, and we're seeing a lot of that. And that will be extremely hazardous, and we are seeing sites where that is appearing, and it is appearing at scale and at speed.
Can I just add?
Of course, yeah.
Most materials are hazardous in to the environment that they're in if it is different in the right volumes and in the wrong place. The problem, some of the categories of hazardous waste, the things that have been listed, paint, solvents, etc., they are common materials we all think of as everyday materials, but can have a very detrimental impact locally. The biggest problem with illegal dumping, fly tipping, whether at scale or at small scale, is it is diffuse, so it's spread, it is unmonitored, and therefore actually the environmental impact is bigger cumulatively than it would be if it's in a controlled site, and that's the difficulty of it, and that's where the impact is.
Thank you for that. So the final point being approximately how much waste is discovered due to monitoring versus being reported by Londoners? If either you have, yeah.
Well, if I start, reporting is the big problem. So the latest national waste statistics, and I haven't got the London breakdown, but at national level, unfortunately, less than 27% of illegally dumped waste is actually reported in the first place. So the majority goes unreported, and therefore it is down to local authority officers, environment agency officers to discover it in their routine monitoring or in their streetscape walking, etc., etc. So we have to do something, and there are opportunities, and I think one of them is listed in the questions later, to encourage greater reporting both from businesses, business associations whose interest it is to have a good quality local environment for the benefit of the economy, etc., local amenity groups, community groups, as we heard of earlier, to do what they can to report on a structured basis, and local authorities especially to respond quickly and effectively to that reporting, because it is a vicious cycle. And I've forgotten which one of the panel, the committee, said how many reports they do. I regularly report fly tips from my local area. I get depressed by the lack of responsiveness and how long it sits there before it's remediated on a time. And I won't say which local authority that is, but so that effective response to reporting and encouraging greater levels of reporting are vital, important, and opportunities for improvement.
Okay. Assembly Member Boff, if it's quick.
Yes, Mr. Russell, you talked about some of the environmental hazards. Has there ever been, are one of those environmental hazards the risks of wildfire? Because it's something that we face in London as a very serious threat. And I wondered if there might be any connection, bearing in mind there's lots of pieces of glass that can operate as lenses in these, in some of this flight.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't describe it as wildfire, but certainly localised fires. I think if we were to say wildfire, that tends to give more of an impression of sort of moorland going up in significant areas. But certainly localised fires, indeed. Not necessarily caused by glass magnifying and causing that. The primary source of fires within illegal waste sites is the putrescible waste breaking down an anaerobic digestion, if you like, a process that then heats up. That heats up to a degree that it then will cause a localised fire. And the only real solution to that is to actually starve it of oxygen. So looking at options to try and cap a site to stop oxygen getting down to it, to reduce the likelihood of because you need the triangle, the fuel, the air, and the ignition. And if you've got the air there, then the rest will follow.
Well, I think Raymond knows about wildfires.
Indeed.
Oh, can I just make an additional point there? Far be it from me to challenge Barry, but I would say there is a greater risk of fire being caused. At the moment, the scourge of the legitimate and professional waste sector is batteries and battery fires, and that is as relevant and pertinent to large-scale illegal dumping as it is here. Lithium-ion batteries, fans in the heat wave that have been sold, most of those fans will be used for a bit. They'll either go wrong or they'll be thrown out when they're not useful. They all have lithium-ion batteries. When you break them down, they spontaneously combust, put them in a dry waste mass, and the fire risk there is huge. Illegal sites, whether it's in a depot, in a warehouse, or wherever it is one of the biggest risks, both environmentally and from an amenity and health and safety point of view. from in this area as well as in the professional regulated sector.
Absolutely. The London Fire Brigade say that lithium-ion fires are the modern equivalent of chip phone fires. Yeah. Assembly Member McCartney.
Thank you. My first question is for the Environment Agency, if I can. And you've talked a little already about some of the figures of fly tips that are reported to you, but I noticed from your figures you have 3 sites currently listed as high priority. How significant is that large scale of illegal fly tipping and dumping in London, and how many of those are reported to you each year?
So we've recently published on gov.uk what we're calling our priority sites. So working with DEFRA, they've asked us to review sites which then it might not necessarily be size, but there's a number of factors that look at them being significant potentially to the local community. So it could be a relatively small size site, but actually have a big local impact, in terms of the local community, the environment and so on. So we've gone through and have assessed those against those criteria, and 3 of those are within London. That doesn't mean that there's only 3 sites in London we're concerned about. There are a significant number of sites, and we've been working very proactively with both professional partners. What we find, actually, we have very good relationship. My patch is to the north of the river, and we have really good relationships with the local authorities there in terms of working hand in hand in looking to resolve the potential issue. They're extremely difficult ones to resolve and incur significant amounts of money to do so. As we've seen, you'll have heard about the Kidlington one, and the cost for the removal of the waste at that site. So we're working with the local authorities. We're working with police when we can. I think going back to the point when what can be done differently, speed of reporting is absolutely key, because if we're able to get in, or if we're notified of it, once we've been told of it, the Environment Agency has 48 hours and we will be physically on site. And once we've done that, if we can then assess it that it's an illegal waste site and we can then stop it, that is the most effective way of preventing the damage to the environment and everyone else, than waiting till it's done and then we've got to argue about who's going to clear it up and where the costs for that are going to come from. But yeah, following on from what Dan was saying, the ability for the local community, professional partners, us identifying ourselves, yeah, absolutely, but that's not going to be, we're not there every day, and having that, we've got a very easy way of getting in contact with us to report it, and then we're there within 48 hours.
Lovely. And from your figures, do you have any differences between inner and outer London? I noticed that your 3 high priority sites are in outer London. I'm just wondering whether it's because of the road network, the M25 and so forth, just makes those sites a lot easier to dump.
We have more sites out of London, and what we also see is there is a transportation of waste that comes from central London, London suburbs, and then makes its way out to Hertfordshire, up to Anglian area, through to the Midlands, and we've traced waste to be able to see the routes that it goes. So it's not that central London doesn't have an issue. It doesn't have the same available space for large-scale illegal waste sites than some of the boroughs do.
The earlier panel talked about local authorities not necessarily talking to each other. Do the different regions of the Environment Agency, did you talk to each other?
That is one area where I can probably give quite a good message, is that the network that we have. So myself and my colleagues in each of the other areas, we meet on a very regular basis. We have a national team, which Bob is part of, that provides an oversight, and we regularly discuss what methods we're doing. We have a national enforcement team, so we're very well connected. And what we also do, we share our resources. like any organisation, we would love to have 5 times the number of officers that we have to be able to tackle this. But when we do have issues and we do have particular high priority areas, for example, there's a site in Hodes Wood where people have been supporting in terms of helping resolve that particular issue. We will do inter-area aid where we will swap officers and provide that support. So I think there is definitely areas of room for improvement with the local authorities in terms of how they work, but then they're on different models, whereas we are, if you like, on one model, and it's just about how our communications work, which are good. And I don't know if Bob wants to add to that from his national perspective.
Leave it there because I think we've got some further detailed questions on that a little
Bob is
later.
wishing to come in. He has his hand raised, and
I was going to just jump in and add a little bit to what Barry has said there, because there have been a number of well-publicised incidents over the last, 9 months or so. And on the back of that, DEFRA has launched a waste crime action plan, and we ourselves have launched a 10-point plan of our own. And part of that is about encouraging more people to report stuff. Part of it is about setting up a new unit to look at all sorts of data to see if we can spot where things might happen, and that includes links with land registry, so we can see where changes of ownership are taking place which might be suspicious. And another part of it is working with local authorities to share intelligence. So we're setting up a pilot with Kent County Council, which we want to then extend to all of the local authorities across Kent. And once we've proved that model, we look to expand it across the country. But it is about getting and sharing intelligence so we can all react much more quickly and preferably before stuff has happened rather than afterwards, because chasing events that have happened is much harder than dealing with them beforehand.
Thank you, that's very helpful. And then my question is to both Dan and Barry. It's about organised crime, and what is the role of organised crime in fly tipping in London and the surrounding areas? Are you able to estimate it?
There are some relatively clear estimations that in excess of 35% of illegal dumping at scale is caused by serious and organised criminal gangs. So they have realised, they have moved in with the money, with the opportunities to make money, make it quickly, relatively low risk, etc., etc. And we sit on the oversight board for the Joint Unit on Waste Crime, which has been set up, established, hosted by the Environment Agency, but also involves police, local authorities, us, the operating sector trade body, the Environmental Services Association, and that has been set up specifically to, again, prevent, disrupt, and enforce against serious and organised waste crime. So it is a relatively recent phenomenon at the scale that we're seeing, but there is more and more clear evidence and more structured approach now to addressing it.
Am I right in thinking that serious and organised crime will find a site and then send out, if you like, messages to a vast network who will then come and dump? So it's quite an organised network,
the land management practices, these are quite smart and sophisticated operations. On the one hand, they seem really rudimentary when you see the result, a huge illegally tipped of thousands of tons of rubbish, and the Kidlington site was 20 or 30,000 tons that had happened over a number of months before the site was closed. And half of the issue is they will deliberately identify land that can be leased by a shadow company with several different chains before you actually get to the landowner or the operator at the moment. And whether that's a field, as was the case in Kidlington, but they set it up, they turn up with high-vis vests, they make it look like a legit operation before they throw the gates open, and then that's when the call goes out to put it in. They lease warehouses, they lease articulated, they will get hold of old articulated lorry trailers, fill it up with waste and just park it in a lay-by and abandon it. So the types of operation that we're talking about and are pretty sophisticated, pretty clever and hard to get in front of, but good progress is being made now.
And another example of where the way they operate is that they will go into farmers' land. They will offer to do works for farmers. We've seen this before. That we're in your area. We've got some material from another job which is inert material. We can replace the access track across your fields. For minimal cost. It helps us get rid of the material. The farmer sort of sees that as a bit of a win-win situation, and before they know it, as well as having their track relayed with hazardous waste, they have piles in their field, sometimes tens of metres high, which has appeared almost overnight. It doesn't happen necessarily overnight, but it happens rapidly, and that's due to the network they have. Is once they get a new site, they're able to get that network live and bring it in at speed and at volume. So we're seeing that quite a lot. I mean, in the past we have seen warehouses that have been rented, and all very legitimate, all appeared to be very legitimate until the landowner, they've even been rented on a lease, and when the lease is up, the landowner goes in, opens the door, and it's absolutely full of illegal hazardous waste. So they are very, very sophisticated in the way they operate, and they're also very difficult when we do apprehend them. So we're able to seize vehicles, seize phones, seize laptops, and be able to do some forensic analysis on those. But that is timely and it's costly, and the resource available to do that means that we can't then spread ourselves across all the other sites that we have.
Thank you. And Bob, you wanted to add something?
Just flag a point of detail, really. Organised crime is a very specific term that the Home Office uses and generally requires mapping by the National Crime Agency to identify organised crime gangs. But illegal waste management is, as both Dan and Barry have indicated, highly organised, but it may not always meet the definition of organised crime that the Home Office would use.
Thank you. And my final question is around, I suppose, the definition of a rogue trader. I think, was it Dan, you talked about this, about the system being able to get a licence is actually open to abuse. Do we know what is the role of the smaller scale rogue traders in the waste sector in the rise of fly tipping?
Hard to get a handle on exactly, because a lot of illegal dumping activity takes place by people who aren't even purporting to be an operator within the sector. So we, CIWM, we train and accredit professional individuals to operate permitted sites under the regulated regime. A rogue trader is anybody who is purporting to be a waste manager of any sort, collector, carrier, broker, dealer, tipper, and is acting outside of that permitted regime. And that involves whether it's on a site that has no permit, whether it's on a site that has a permit but they are abusing and breaking the terms of that permit, or whether they are completely operating rogue, as in a person with a van who will just say, person with van services, we'll collect your rubbish, dispose of it, here's my licence, because it's so easy to register, here's my waste carrier's licence, give me your rubbish, we'll sort it out, and they'll find the nearest field or dump site to put it on. So it's really difficult to give a definition of a rogue trader, but it is anybody operating outside of the professional and regulated sector.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I think, Bob, are you wishing to come in? Is that a legacy hand?
Apologies, I keep sticking my hand up and jumping in. From my perspective, virtually everything that's happening illegally in the waste management the agency is dealing with is done by a rogue trader, using that sort of term fairly loosely. There's a distinction there between the illegal waste management that the agency deals with and the much larger number of smaller fly tipping incidents which could involve individual householders and like. But most of what we're dealing with, if not all of it, is someone purporting to be operating legally but not.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Mahfouz.
So moving on to some of the government reforms. So you talked already about the waste crime action plan. What would be the sort of top 3 to 5 things that you feel are going to make a huge impact from the introduction of this? I'll start with yourself, Dan.
So there are 35 points in the Waste Crime Action Plan. I can't remember all of them, if I'm being honest, but exactly. But some of the good stuff that is happening is the new regulations that we talked about. So controllers and transporters regulations, digital waste tracking, some of the other stuff like EPR that will make money available for local authorities to invest in their services and infrastructure. So the responsible producers are paying. Some of the new stuff that's happening within the Waste Crime Action Plan is there is, as Bob and Barry have said, there is a new intelligence unit that will coordinate, that will look at data sources that they wouldn't otherwise look at for trends to see where serious and organised criminality is taking place. New use of technology, so drone technology, for example, being better used to gather evidence in a structured way rather than just slightly more ad hoc, as previously has been the case. Best practice and guidance on vehicle seizures. So local authorities already have the powers to seize vehicles that have used for waste crime activity, but it hasn't necessarily been promoted or the direction hasn't been given. So there is a range of all of those measures which will begin to come in. There's a performance board that's now been set up to look at the success rate of all of those things, and that includes remediation of sites, speed of remediation of sites, of the big sites that we've talked about, the Kidlingtons, etc. Reporting levels, how do we increase those? The most important thing, as far as I can tell, that will improve and the Waste Crime Action Plan should focus on even more is collaboration. So collaboration and coordination between the different agencies has been far too nationwide, certainly within Greater London, almost certainly. I'd need to do additional checks, but the lack of coordination between local authorities, the Environment Agency, the local police and crime commission, the regional and organised crime units, which do deal with the serious and organised stuff as well, that has been patchy at best. So better coordination, better sharing of intelligence, better sharing of case studies and the approaches that work, which are comprehensive in their nature, will be, I think, key that will come from this action plan.
And just before I bring you in, Barry, is there an obligation in terms of making sure that all of those partners, in terms of not just collaborate on case studies and good practice, but actually in terms of the data and the hard evidence that can deliver the difference?
I've got some views, and I've certainly got some things that I would contribute to this. But I'm going to defer to Bob because he's in the national team, and this is his. I'm the operational front, and Bob is very much the national team. So, Bob, do you want to?
That's absolutely fair enough, Barry. I think it's fine. Yeah, Dan's covered a lot of it. A couple of extra bits that are quite important. There's going to be revision of the waste exemption rules because there are a number of activities that people can undertake without the need for an environmental permit on the basis that they're low risk. But there's plenty of evidence that some of those low risk activities are a gateway to illegal waste activities. So DEFRA is committed to amending those rules, which will make it easier to regulate there. And they've also committed to working with us to improve some of our investigation and enforcement powers, which will make it easier for us to do some of the things that we need to do. So we have power to collect evidence and investigate, but it's scattered amongst much environmental legislation and in some places isn't as strong as we'd like it to be. So we're talking to DEFRA and DEFRA talking to Home Office about possibly moving towards more Police and Criminal Evidence Act powers, which will give us more effective investigation powers. And then Barry touched on problems with restriction notices and orders, which have difficulties with going through court processes. So we're talking to DEFRA about how we could potentially improve those powers so that we can use those sorts of things more effectively. And also looking at our vehicle seizure arrangements to see if they can be made more effective too. So a range of regulatory changes that would give us a bit more power to do stuff more quickly.
Thanks, Bob. I mean, that sounds, though, as if you're waiting for government to still implement new legislation, which obviously takes a bit of time to go through. But is there a, from what we've talked about already, is it obligatory that organisations do what you've talked about in terms of these investigations and collaborate appropriately, or are you, relying on goodwill here?
Some of that's in train. So the exemptions work is in train, and government is working on a timetable to deliver that. Changes to the Police and Criminal Evidence Act look as though they may take a little while to come, but there is commitment from DEFRA and Home Office to deliver them. So, work is going on it at pace, but it's not going to be a desperately quick process. The other changes to the restriction notices, orders, to vehicle seizure, slightly less nailed down yet, but we're being received very well at the moment.
Okay. And just on the licensing changes that you've obviously talked about in quite a bit of detail already, so you don't need to sort of repeat that. But I think in terms of, clearly there's the new electronic waste transfer notes. How much of a difference is that going to make in terms of reducing this challenge?
The transfer notes themselves, I think, will merely make a paper-based system much more easy to search. But the overall digital waste tracking system will give us much more visibility of waste arisings, waste movements, and allow us to identify where stuff looks as though it's slipping out of the system. So it will massively improve our ability to build an intelligence picture and look at weak spots and see where stuff is going wrong. It's not going to be a magic bullet. It's not suddenly going to mean everything goes to the right place automatically, but it's a very strong weapon in tracking stuff and seeing where the problems are.
But we should be aware that it's also being phased in over quite a bit of time. So the first tranche, the first phase is coming in this October. That's only for waste receiving sites. The carriers, all of the others in the supply chain won't be covered until years hence. So it will be a gradual improvement and, as Bob said, part of the solution, but not a silver bullet.
Not necessarily that silver bullet. And I guess from your point of view, Bob, at the Environment Agency, do you have the resources in order to make sure that all of that data that will become available to you in due course is something you can actually utilise and look for those gaps and where it's going wrong?
It's sort of straying into the next one.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Hold that thought, Bob. Sorry.
Thank you, Assembly Member Reviews. Spoiler alert, Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you, Chair. Bob, let's talk about resources. I believe you've been given an additional £45 million for the Environment Agency. What impact is that going to have on London, and how's that going to be used?
I can't give you chapter and verse, I'm afraid. It's £45 million. It's permission to spend an additional £45 million that came to us slightly out of the blue at the end of March, and it's a very large amount of money, and we need to make sure we're spending it effectively. So we are working on a business case that's building up all of the detail of how that money would be used, and until this case has been finalised and signed off, I can't sort of go into the detail of what it's going to do. It's being the thrust of it, though, is to strengthen our operational focus, increase visibility at priority sites, and move us towards this more intelligence-led model that we want to follow, using better use of data, better technology, and potentially AI-enabled tools to allow us to sort of prevent, detect and disrupt the stuff earlier rather than respond to it. So things like the intelligence hub that we're talking about will be funded from some of that money. We're putting together a proposal to spend a relatively small proportion of it this year because, as I say, it came in as a surprise, and it takes time to gear up to spend that sort of money. We will be putting some additional staff in local areas, but the detail will be worked up and will be clearer come September, October time.
Thank you, Bob. And sorry, Dan.
Well, I'll just make a slightly wider point. Resources aren't always the answer, but it is undoubtedly true that both local authorities and the Environment Agency in the area of effective enforcement have been starved of resources for a number of years, up until fairly recently. But a good example of the scale of resources that's needed. From permitting and regulatory activity, the Environment Agency raise about 500 million quid a year, rough figures as far as I can tell, and yet 45 million is the extra, over 3 years, extra funding available for enforcement. Now, we're told it's a Treasury red line. You cannot divert resources from the regulated activity into enforcing against illegal activity. But we are questioning that, and we think that should be questioned, because when it comes to resources, it is obvious there has been a shortfall, there continues to be a shortfall, and it should be proportionate. The professional sector is calling out for more resources to tackle waste crime, because it is undermining their legitimate businesses as well, and they are paying those regulated permitting fees. And they want a greater proportion of that used in enforcement.
And Bob, I'd love for you to respond to that point. Your colleague Barry's just got his hand up, so I'll come to Barry first, but then I'll come back to you, Bob, on that point. Barry.
Thanks, Zach. I want to give a sort of how it feels on the ground, because I think Bob has got the national perspective in terms of where that money will be, where it's going to be diverted to. So the impact with me, my department, and the teams that are actually working on the ground, what we're hoping to see as a result of that is more enforcement activity on the ground, so increased inspections, and inspections not only of illegal sites, but also of waste carriers, suspected illegal operators, increasing inspections at sites that may be compliant, because they can go out of compliance. We've got a site at the moment. The front of it is a compliant site, but behind it is a whole load of illegal activity. Earlier intervention at legal waste sites, so the earlier we can get in, when we know about them, we can seal them off, we can stop further activity. So the earlier we do that, and that allows us to shut down sites before they become large environmental problems. A greater use of intelligence and technology. I mentioned earlier that we've done, we're talking about digital waste tracking and improved data analysis, but also we have, over the last couple of years, built quite a fleet of drones, quite significant size drones that are available to, are able to fly in all weather. So it's really helped us in terms of recording sites, and then that feeds through to evidence and taking the cases forward. A stronger action against organised waste crime, so working closely with ourselves, HMRC, police forces and local authorities, and improved environmental outcomes as a result of that, reducing fly tipping, illegal waste sites, and also the landfill tax fraud. And we do a lot of work with HMRC in terms of identifying that, and for them to then be able to go after the criminals as well. So I think we are very much hoping to see quite an impact as a result of that 45 million, and Bob and colleagues will tell us how much will be coming down and in what form that can then be spent.
And how are you balancing a risk assessment with the drones and nature sites? Because presumably some of these areas would be areas of beauty if they weren't being fly tipped.
The risk assessments of going onto the sites, do you mean?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly that, and use of drones.
So it's a very finely balanced area, because we need to be able to go to the sites to see them, to get eyes on as to what's happening on the site. But also, some of these sites are down narrow tracks, they're hidden away from the road. If we can see them from the road, then great, we can do an initial assessment there. If they've been reported by the police or the local authority, we can give an initial assessment and categorise them. We have 4 different categories of pollution, of incident. If we're unable to get there, unable to see it from the road, for example, and it's some way back, we will look to deploy the drone, put a drone over there. Or we will look to go there with partners. So in terms of, we won't be sending an individual down there on their own on a Saturday night to go and look at a waste site. We will have risk assessments and precautions and dynamic risk assessments in place, which means if we can't get to a site and we can't get to a site safely, we will do it when we can do it safely, rather than doing it just to meet a timescale.
And can I ask about prioritisation? So the Environment Committee recently went on a site visit to Warren Farm in Ealing, and one of the rivers there, a problem was people throwing lime bikes into the river. The lithium battery, again, those lithium batteries, being really dangerous for nature. I think Lyme, we were told, had been investing in rangers to stop that happening, or to get the bikes out if it does happen. At the same time, there were media reports of...
You're going slightly off script here, Assembly Member.
Well, it is about fly tipping, because with Friends of River Roading, there was a strange story in the media that they were being threatened with enforcement activity for cleaning up a river. How do you make sure that with this £45 million that it's going to be spent on enforcement of actually fly tipping rather than community groups that might be trying to clean up their local space from fly tipping?
Because the money, when it comes to us, it would be our national teams will agree where those priorities are. We will then be directed in the areas. So I am a area environment manager, so I have the operational responsibilities. So we will be directed as to where that money is then spent. And because of the size of the issue and the focus of that money, it will be for us to be able to improve and develop our ability to identify illegal waste sites and actually close them down sooner. It won't be on smaller scale fly tipping type incidents.
Thank you. Bob, I said I'd come back to you on the point that Dan was making. I think it was partly around interdisciplinary as well, and DEFRA working with the Met, how that can be more collaborative.
I think Dan's main point was about the discrepancy between the amount of money that we collect for doing compliance work on permitted sites versus the amount of money we have available for doing enforcement work on illegal sites. And the numbers he gave are essentially correct. Managing public money tells us that we can only collect money from permitted facilities to provide a service to those permitted facilities, and there's a challenge around whether generic enforcement work is providing a service to those permitted facilities. I know Dan said that's being challenged, and I will await with interest the outcome of that challenge. But as things stand, we believe that we're compliant with the government rules on how we're spending that money.
Thank you. And finally, Bob, can I ask how the Joint Unit for Waste Crime support coordinated action and enforcement?
Well, the joint unit is precisely that. It is a joint unit. So it's got multiple members, and they work together to coordinate that action around the place. So it's groups like HMRC, the police, the National Fire Chiefs Council, British Transport Police, National Crime Agency. Some of the devolved regulators are involved as well, and it works in partnership across industry, including local and national government, to deliver disruption and enforcement intervention. So its aim is to make sure that we are as joined up as we can be, but it is at the more serious end of the scale, because its nature is it's quite small, so it can only deal with the higher impact stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Dan wanted to come in.
Just one very quick point on the joint unit. Yep. It is illustrative. The joint unit has recently doubled in size. It's gone from 6 people to 12 people tackling serious and organised waste crime at a national level. Yep. It shows the paltry resources that have been directed at this to
just
date.
12 people.
It's doing some brilliant work, and it is bringing those organisations together, and it is having some serious success. Its annual review is coming out shortly, but in terms of resources, it shows that they are limited.
Thank you.
On a point of detail, that's 12 Environment Agency staff. Being a joint unit, the intention and aim and actual operational method is it draws in people from the partner organisations as well. So its effective resource is a bit greater than that.
Thank you so much. Right, we're going to go straight to the last question. Assembly Member Prince.
Thank you very much. Good evening. It feels like evening. Can I start with the Environmental Agency, please? I'm sorry, I just saw something. It's quite funny. There are. Sorry.
It's got the giggles now.
Yeah, I've got the giggles. It wasn't about the pathetic joke I made. I just saw something else a bit earlier. Right, there are a number of existing illegal waste sites in London. How do you monitor and assess the environmental impacts of illegal dumping sites?
Okay, so Identify and monitor. So the identification of them comes through from the process I talked about earlier, where we will receive reports either from a member of the public, from a professional partner, local authority, someone who reports that in on our incident hotline. And we will then go out and assess that. Now, when we go out and assess that, we will then categorise it as to the severity of it. And if it is of a severity that then needs for us to be involved in it, it will then become something which we will then develop into a case. So potentially looking at prosecution. The initial actions in seeing that site will be to prevent any further dumping of that waste. Once we've got a site that is in that situation, or once there is a site, I won't say we've got a site because it's not on our land, it's not our site. We are the recognised authority to be taking the prosecution through. We will then monitor that site to collect evidence. So, well, we monitor it to collect evidence, but also to prevent damage to the environment. So we will deploy whatever resources are needed in terms of being able to monitor that site. Now, that could be monitoring the site for the heat that's coming off it, and we do that very much in collaboration with colleagues in Fire and Rescue Service. It could be monitoring the emissions that are coming off it. If there is smoke, again, it can be in partnership. We have air quality monitoring stations. We have portable air quality monitoring stations that can be deployed to certain areas to measure the quality of the air in that area. And the key one for us, where we have the sort of the prime role, is in terms of its leaching. If there's water that's getting into the illegal waste site and then it is leaching off, going into potentially water courses or groundwater. So we will monitor the site. If it is at risk of leaching, we'll monitor it both with samples that we can go out and take on a regular basis, compare the samples upstream and downstream of the site so that we can see what the impact of that site is having, if any. But also we can deploy sondes, which are devices that will do constant water quality measurement. We also have the ability to measure if there is any impact to the groundwater. So we, if you like, we will look at the air pollution to the land, but also pollution to the water. So all three areas.
Thank you. So what resources are available to you to remediate the sites or make them safe? Do you have any resources to do that at all?
We have no resources to remediate the site.
Great, okay. So, you may be aware, you mentioned earlier about a North London site. Yeah. We also have one in East London, in my patch, Havering, where I've just been elected the leader. Rainham, you might know it, Arnoldsfield, Launders Lane.
No, well.
Which was, again, on fire yesterday. I mean, I know that you've been working with the LA, but what can you really do?
For that specific site? Well,
or any other site like it, really?
It's. I mean, as you will have seen, stepping into that role and following on from the previous leader we worked with closely, and the project manager for that particular site. My team do work extremely close, trying to look at solutions. So we've been advising on the Posicrete capping for that site, providing some technical advice for that. And I think, you know, as you're probably aware, the landowner is not supportive of that as an approach. But it's very limited in terms of being able to remediate a site, which is why our focus has to be on stopping the site in the first place, gathering the evidence and stopping the site being in there in the first place. Once a site's there, it becomes extremely difficult to then manage the impact of the site or to actually remove the site. So the sites that are being removed, and we've talked about Kidlington, another one is Hodeswood down in Kent South London area. those are being removed upon the direction of DEFRA. So we don't have resources to do that. We've been directed by DEFRA to facilitate the removal of those sites. So it's not a decision that we make, it's a decision we're directed by DEFRA to do.
So what resources or what changes in the law do you think would help you to solve situations like we have in Havering and North London? Because obviously prevention's better than cure, but it's a bit like the NHS, isn't it? You know, prevention's better than cure, but if someone's having a heart attack, you actually need to deal with it. So, you know, what do you think? Because it's clear that the local authority is hamstrung by red tape and legislation, which is preventing them from actually resolving the issue, and it's not for the want of trying. So what would you recommend to this committee? What would be your ask of national government in regards to resources or powers, and what legislative changes would you like to see in order to give you the power to do something other than just give advice?
If
or
I
would you not want any?
If I could leave one thought, because there's a whole range of things that I think we'd like to see, which, you know, there's a whole range of things, but I think the one thing that would make the significant difference is for there to be significant punitive action taken against those that do it. At the moment, it is seen very much as an occupational hazard, and the money to be made far, far, far outweighs the risk of doing the illegal dumping. I mentioned earlier at the beginning that it's seen as a new narcotics. We need to be able to have the sort of response in terms of custodial sentences that aren't just a 6-month custodial sentence for making, you know, millions and millions of profit. It needs to be absolutely significant. The Joint Unit for Waste Crime, along with colleagues in the area, in my area, work very closely in terms of identifying who's done it. We have had changes in legislation because Arnold's Field, as you'll be aware, was subject to previous legislation, which means that the landowner is not responsible for work that was done previously. That legislation changed in 2018. But there are a lot of legacy things like that. That's not a new illegal waste site. That's a site which has got a huge history and is an extremely challenging one to deal with, as we're finding out.
I'll come into you in a minute, Bob. Yeah, I'll just in one sec. And you can answer all these questions as well, Bob. So, are you lobbying the government for changes in legislation or for more power? Obviously, you're lobbying for more money, but why wouldn't you be? But, you know, the power and the legislation. Are you lobbying for that, or who would within your organisation be doing that? Oh, I'll ask you that then, Bob.
That's very kind of you. Dan referred earlier to the large number of items in DEFRA's Waste Crime Action Plan, and down towards the bottom of the list on their website is remediate, and DEFRA has undertaken to fund the remediation of 3 sites. They identified 3, but it's not absolutely certain the 3 they identified will be the 3 that they clear. But they also indicate that they're working with the insurance industry to change the position with regard to insurance for waste being deposited on land, because that seems to be an issue that prevents landowners from being able to clear waste on land. And also they are talking to HMRC about possible landfill tax rebates for clearing land, because feedback suggests that the cost of landfill tax can be a barrier to those remediation activities. So DEFRA is aware of the issue and is taking some steps. So it's up to you whether you believe those steps are adequate or not. But the problem is recognised and there is some movement.
But, you know, on the issue of change of legislation, more powers to the Environment Agency, where do you stand on that, Bob?
I don't think the Environment Agency would want to be in a position where it was under some obligation to clear waste from illegally deposited sites because it sort of provides a free disposal route. There was some discussion during the fly tipping conversation about whether quick clearance of waste that does lead people to believe that it's just a disposal method. So I don't think the agency is in that space, but the government is looking at it and the government is taking some steps.
But would you not think it would be handy to have the power to clear or to put whatever remedial solutions in place and then send the bill to the landowner? Wouldn't it be a good thing?
Oh, we have that power. Sorry, a misunderstanding. We can do that. The problem is, or the risk is, that sending a £15 million bill to a landowner might result in it not being paid. And so we will only do that in extreme circumstances because the risk to the public purse is then very significant.
What about the risk to the public from the pollution that the site's causing, as in the case of Arnold Field? Does that not count for anything?
Well, I take your point, but that's the government's role to decide what the appropriate route for dealing with that is, I would suggest. We are a government agency. We are not the decision makers here.
I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Dan.
I'm not a government agency, so I am allowed to support what you're saying.
You can be more breezy.
The powers are there, but remediation and finding a solution to funding remediation and enacting remediation sooner rather than later is a vital part of this equation. To just leave these sites unremediated to sit, and I know they're complex and I know there are issues from both local authority and environment agency perspective, but to the public, to the wider public, what message is that giving? To the criminals, what message is that giving? So a mechanism, and I point you back to those resources that are raised through the permitted activities of the agency. There is money there that could be diverted in the right circumstances, under the right conditions, but it has to be part of the equation.
Well, I agree with you, Dan. Thanks for that. You know, it's visible what we're getting from the Environment Agency, to be honest. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Prince. So I would like to thank all of our guests for their responses. We've now reached the end of the session. If you could just remain seated for a moment whilst we just continue the remaining bits of business. So can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? Can we also delegate supreme authority to me as chair in consultation with party group leaders to agree any output arising from the discussion?
Probably not
Normal operation, obviously. Can I ask the committee to note its work programme and the additional activity undertaken since its last meeting, namely the site visit to the West London Regional Park? The next meeting of the committee is scheduled for 3rd of September 2026 at 10 a.m, I'm afraid, in committee rooms 2 and 3 of City Hall. I have no other urgent business, so that concludes today's meeting.